If you put your ear to the wind and listen very, very closely, you'll hear this really tiny, high-pitched scream. That is actually Kemi Badenoch, um, screaming internally about what is going to happen at these upcoming, local elections. And as we mentioned already, there is already a whispering campaign against her. You already have Robert Jenrick going out and saying, "Yeah, we should do a deal with Reform." Bear in mind, that is the guy who is probably going to replace her. Untouchable. Untouchable. That's why she hasn't even said anything about it, even reprimanded him, demoted him, sacked him, anything, because she knows he is untouchable. Now, as always, we got to give you the reality of these local elections. Yes, the Conservatives are going to lose bigly, to quote Trump, bigly, massively, hugely. Why? Because, as I always remind you, the last time we had these elections, it was 2021. The political landscape was entirely different. Boris Johnson still riding high. We had the vaccine bounce at that time as well. They are defending, remember, 940 seats. So, yeah, they are going to lose a lot of seats. Not all those seats that they lose are going to go to Reform, because as always, they forget about, the Lib Dems and, every single, other party that is going to probably end up taking seats from them. Now, at the end of the day, of course, as we've said, it's inevitable Reform are going to win some seats. Even UKIP won some seats. But can they actually beat the high of UKIP? Absolutely not. Absolutely not. I keep on saying probably between 200, 250. And as I keep on saying, Reform, paper tiger. Popular in the polls, but when it comes to these by-elections, since the general election, there have been over 200. They've only won 14. That is not a good record. That is not a good electoral record. And we're going to have now a big local election that now gets put to the test. That puts Farage's credibility to the test. And even somehow, let's say he wins and Reform take control of councils or they win a regional mayor, then they've got to prove they can actually govern. And I can already tell you now, that ain't going to go well. That ain't going to go well at all. Full stop. It is going to go badly for them. Because, oh boy, do Reform like to infight. They like to argue. They like to blame everything else on them. And trust me, we will see stories coming out left and right about these councils or that particular mayoral candidate, because they are going to be scrutinized hard. Hard. But in the meantime, before we, probably get to that and, having a really dig into all these Reform idiots who are probably going to be, celebrating massively and being like, guys, why are you celebrating? You did awfully. We've got to have a look now at the internal goal setting of the Conservative Party, already trying to lay the foundations of, yes, we're going to lose and we're going to lose quite significantly, but, that's fine somehow. But anyway, we are probably going to see the Conservatives descend into civil warring, probably an attempt to oust Kemi Badenoch over the summer. Things are going to get very interesting. Things are going to get fun. And oh boy, if we go into another Conservative leadership contest and we get another proper contest and they start fighting it out properly, then oh boy, are we in for some fun. We are in for some fun if that does start to happen. So, as always, before we do go on into this, please do remember to click on the like, share, and subscribe button down below. Of course, there is the Patreon page. There's a Buy Me Coffee link. There's the YouTube thank you button. And, of course, as always, there's the Pony Club down below as well. And, of course, it was Wednesday yesterday. So, if you are a member of the Patreon or the Pony Club, go check out the video. So, let's crack on then into this. So, Next month might be something of a bumpy ride for the party and Badenoch. Oh, Giles. Oh, Giles. You do tease. It's not just going to be a bumpy ride. It is going to be a highway to hell for both of them. Anyway, the current leadership of the Conservative Party is now bracing itself for a potentially awkward month or so. It is not any, of course, one thing, though the major focus, of course, will be local elections, but it is now a combination of variables all around those results that could, at this stage, theoretically, cause Kemi Badenoch a headache or worse. Probably worse. Certainly, oh boy, there's going to be a lot of, I can't remember, what is it? Not Gaviscon, that's for indigestion. I can't remember what people take for headaches now, but yeah, aspirin. That's it. There's going to be a lot of aspirin needed at Conservative HQ, certainly during the month of May. That's for certain. A number, of course, these variables have already been explored on this site and via the results from our own Conservative Home Survey. One Tory MPs and the shadow cabinet ministers have now publicly professed to focus even not much, but even privately absolutely do. Let us, of course, talk about these local elections, of course, as a starting point. A month ago, our survey revealed widespread membership belief that results on May the 1st would be pretty bad news for the party, and therefore bad for Kemi Badenoch. There is no escaping the fact that either the media, the membership, or our political opponents, and possibly all three, will see these council elections as some sort of verdict on her leadership so far. Absolutely, they will. Do not underestimate. That is what it will be seen as. There is going to be trouble ahead. There will be some sort of force by Jenrick, either A, to put himself into a more powerful position in, still somehow as leader, maybe even making her some sort of puppet, or shadow behind the thrones while he can sort of come in and take over later. Who knows? But yeah, I think in a year's time, this time next year, she is not leader. I'll be very surprised if we are at April 2026 and Badenoch's still leading. I'll be very, very surprised. Anyway, this is, of course, very much widely accepted amongst those very close to her, and they are certainly braced for that. Lord Ashcroft's polling data, published here, contains perhaps now unexpectedly and politically awkward detail amongst the Conservative voters that there's an expectation of making gains on May. This is the same insane thing. I didn't cover this, but Ashcroft did some polling. Go quickly into this as a side note. Ashcroft did this polling, and the Conservatives were convinced that Labour is doing so bad they can make gains. The copium in the Conservative Party is at an all-time addictive level. That's for certain. Anyway, I'm not sure, of course, anyone at the top, of course, is feeling quite so confident. But obviously, that will be a great result. More strategizing has gone into handling very significant and anticipated reform gains. At worst, expected most is, of course, still the question. That, of course, will ease the PR response into a, quote, great night for the Conservatives. You can always tell if it went bad, a local election, because it was always a great night for a particular party. That is always the saying. Well, you lost all these seats, but it was a great night for the party. Anyway, if that happens, it is, of course, to be welcomed. Let us, of course, stay focused on the concerns. The last time this set of locals was contested was off the back of the good Boris wave. There is, of course, much public enthusiasm, not the bad one, where immigration numbers skyrocketed. It would, of course, be quite the feat to match that good result, let alone even top it. However, any losses are not as severe as the general election last year. Badenoch and his team will at least breathe easier. And of course, that is worth reminding you, as I remind you constantly. In that election last time, they've got 940 seats to defend. They won quite a lot of seats. It was the last time Boris Johnson's like maximum popularity. We're riding off the vaccine bounce, and then it all went downhill from there. Um, a different political time entirely, to where the Conservative Party is today. They are going to lose a lot of seats. That is in no doubt. That is in no question. The question is who takes those seats. Will it be Reform? Will it be the Lib Dems? Will it be Independents? I think Independents are going to win. My other prediction, I think Independents are going to win quite big at this election. I really think so. I think they're going to find they do quite well at this election. However, if our, of course, survey from last month also turns out to be accurate, and its track record is, of course, pretty solid, the big question going to be asked is, why aren't they already bringing out other variables now into play? Both of which have been explored again by our survey. The first is, of course, that very huge lead by Robert Jenrick has with the members in our shadow cabinet league table. This has been discussed before, but the simple political fact is, if he wants to lead the party or not, I think he'd even agreed that he still does at some point in his own vigorous style of opposition and his success, again, within it, the victory over the two-tier justice and sentencing court backing down, for one, mean that he's going to have attention whatever, again, his future is. And then the opposing part is of the Conservatives' job right now. He doesn't even need to be, quote, on maneuvers or whatever he is. He just is. To be positioned now as the alternative, should Badenoch struggle, there's, of course, going to be the membership verdict and then the chatter. The team are already braced for this. He already is on maneuvers. Like, just he is on maneuvers. There's already a whispering campaign out against Badenoch right now. Her leadership now really is just a ticking clock. It's just a matter of not if, but when she goes now. And it's what takes her out. Is there a successful push? Is she removed in October? As some people we've seen on talked about here before, that is a very serious thing. Does Jenrick maybe push to be promoted into a higher position? We don't know. We wait and see on that. Badenoch has, of course, been very campaigning hard for the locals. She congratulated Jenrick on his success in the sentencing round. He, of course, chose to serve in a shadow cabinet, all of which means he's now very small fry to the fact that it is very even hard to find a Tory MP, a councillor, who thinks another contest now wouldn't be a disaster for the party. Again, the precise nature of the local election results will have some effect on that equation. And that is the other thing. If it is bad, and it's still seen as bad to have a one now, there may be other people going, well, is it really bad to have one now? Next general election is still some time off. Whoever we get in now has at least the time to do something, to change something about the system. Will they be able to do that? Will they be able to reverse their fortunes given that time? Or do you linger under the very false pretenses that somehow Badenoch is going to turn this around? I don't think she is. And if, again, she somehow manages to survive, then next year you've got the Welsh Senate elections, you've got the Scottish elections, which are also going to be seen as pretty much a reflection of her leadership, just as these ones are. Remember, the Conservatives, all we have seen from them covering all this stuff is we've seen this thing about they're going to have this massive turnaround, things may be bad now, but don't worry. The turnaround we're about to experience is going to be phenomenal. Gee, remember when Rishi Sunak was talking about the biggest political comeback in history? Yeah, it's copium. They just do not realize the situation they're in, how bad their party has gotten. It's fascinating to watch. It really is fascinating to watch as an outsider. So perhaps, of course, even more significant, of course, of any disquiet will be clearly not as cost dependent on the results, but also might even add now to this mix, as was outlined by Henry Hill yesterday as a result of the survey suggestions, saying more than half think that the party should be moving a lot faster towards developing a full policy program. The other more significant finding is that clearly the other half of the membership feel that the party has now not gone far enough in acknowledging the mistakes it made in government. So that is the insane thing. They've got one part of the party just goes, acknowledge all these mistakes you made in government. For the love of God, just please say that was an accident. But of course you can't, because there's a lot of Conservatives, even those current sitting MPs, who still think that the past 14 years of them ruling were absolutely great, they were wonderful, and that they did nothing wrong. Because once you start to admit one mistake, then it just becomes a snowball where they have to admit a load of other stuff. And that, of course, would bring, shall we say, the Brexit question into play. Was the party going down the Brexit path, championing Brexit, really that good? Say so many cans of worms that could be opened on that. This, of course, would very much be a double-edged conundrum now for the leaders' team. On one hand, they could address this very much head on and just talk about nothing else for a bit, which would, of course, be very strategically difficult given that most of the shadow cabinet were involved in the government and at some time had a box of ammunition to their opponents. That is exactly what you would see. You know, everyone involved in the current party has been in some way involved in that previous government of disasters. Why are they going to be good? What is going to be, good about them? I mean, it's a disaster waiting to happen, but someone has to do it. Someone has to do it. Even Badenoch, I think, knows she has to do it at some point as well, because she quote well, it was a non-apology, but she recognized they have to do something, but it didn't go far enough. As you can see, when you've got 50% of your own party going, yeah, that wasn't the best thing, maybe. We need to maybe even go further. On the other hand, those regular caveats do appear in the columns from the shadow cabinet now addressing failings, including those made by the Conservative governments, aren't now clearly satisfying the members' desire now for a full mea culpa. I know it is now two being wrestled now at the top. I'll predict, of course, the more you get, the more perhaps explicit and even detailed versions of the latter, not even more the former. No doubt we'll return to the question in future surveys to see if the dial shifts. So, with a number now of potentially awkward variables now in play with those local election results, what do we know of the leadership team's thinking? Firstly, there are a number of those whose judgment has now been consistently solid, who thinks the locals won't be catastrophic, and if not, great. That is some serious copium, but we'll see what happens when we get the you always remember that there were people in her leadership team thinking these locals won't be catastrophic. I think the Lib Dems on May the 2nd will beg to differ very loudly because oh boy, I think they are in for a very significant win in these local elections. So anyway, it continues. If not, of course, great, at least manageable. If that is the case, the leadership team will now point to the fact that leadership has been putting on the campaign yards. Some skeptics have now constantly accused her away from shying away from. There are, of course, some who are now much more worried about the results, and they will go now back to the point of that survey that there may not have been enough sorry from the past. They will say it is not a referendum on Badenoch, but the voters are still not over their disregard for all things conservative. It is now almost a mantra with one of their closest advisors, which I can now be seeing deployed, where the results are, of course, to be very bad, saying the voters are not listening to us yet. That is why we will take our time now to renew and rebuild. And yet, that is what Kemi Badenoch has been meant to be doing for the past couple of weeks and months, or at least since she got in. It's not really very much happening, shall we say. There's even rumors about them having to sell Conservative campaign headquarters in London, which, if that happens, that will be funny. And oh boy, will we be going in on that if that happens. It might, of course, emerge as a we still have to build trust, and with the electorate and the party is now really under new leadership. In the crudest sense, now that the old change narrative is at least has the benefit of trying to be true, but that doesn't always mean that it works. Until May the 1st, expect the campaigning now on the ground to accelerate and to intensify, because for the party and even potentially the leader of herself, the next few weeks might take some navigation. The only positive and concrete approach aspect is I know the leadership team are very focused on it, perhaps hoping, wishfully or not, that it is not such a bumpy ride as it might to appear now. It is going to be very, very bumpy because they are hoping that Labour lose as well. And they are hoping that Labour lose just as much. They go, oh, well, you see, wasn't as big a bad for us all. Meanwhile, who are the parties making the gains? Ultimately, it will be the Lib Dems. Like I keep on saying this time and time again. The Lib Dems are going to win big, very, very big. I think at these local elections, that and probably the independents as well. But as always, we'll see what happens on this. So obviously, lots of talking about this, lots of talking about this in the comments, but I don't think there are any good ones this time, unfortunately. But anyway, let me know what you think, because I think we are going to see. Well, it was a great night for the Conservatives deployed. The classic line, you know. And of course, it will be a lot of expectation management. We've seen in the past. They're expecting to lose 400 seats. The guy, if you remember, we read that one, somehow was expecting all those 400 to go straight to like reform. Again, forgetting about all these other parties and even independents. Remember, last time we had this election, back in 2021, biggest win for independents of any recent local election. So we shall see what happens. But we are less than a week away now, so we shall see what happens. And always remember, guys, you still need your ID, so take your ID with you to the polling stations. Remind people of that. And also remind them to get out to vote, especially if there's an election in their area. Like I say, there's no election going on in my area, so there's no activity to talk about. But for a lot of people, really doesn't seem so. Hull, from stuff I'm hearing over there, people aren't even aware that there is even a local election, or even that there is an opportunity now to go out and vote for their regional mayor. So, yeah, remind people if you know they are in, there's a local election going on in their area, because turnout, I think, might be important. But I think turnout is going to be dire for this local election. Absolutely dire. And that means whoever has the most motivated, people out there probably is where you're going to see the wins. So we'll see what happens. But as always, thank you very much for watching. And of course, as always, we'll see you all next time.